Oh wow, look at these. I've been staring at them all day as they drink water and I'm so excited to be using them. This is a fantastic rose. I keep going to call it light bulb, which doesn't really do it any justice, but it is actually candlelight. It's an Ecuadorian rose called candlelight and it's just amazing. Now it's a white rose, sold as a white rose, but it does have a creamy sort of undertone with it. So I've paired it with the gerbera that you might have seen me use before, and then this pink sort of pink shade of Alstroemeria. I nearly forgot its name then as well. And what I'm looking to do is create quite an opulent arrangement in this vintage vase. I've got a couple of different choices of foliage, and I also have some September flower to my left hand side because I'm not quite sure yet how it's going to evolve. This wasn't on my plan for videos, but I couldn't resist when I saw them at the market a few days ago. Now my container is a vintage glass, beautiful shaped vase, very popular at the moment for wedding work, and I've used floral foam. Now it's, you know, not really in keeping with a vintage container. Maybe a more natural form of mechanics would have been better, like some wire netting or a plastic holder of some description. But because I wanted to create quite an opulent design and the vase itself is quite narrow, I felt that using foam would give me a bigger arrangement at the end. So that's my sort of thinking. I have half a block of floral foam pre-soaked in a plastic dish, and that will sit quite comfortably on the top. Now it is going to move back and forth as I'm doing the arranging, and you might find it a bit frustrating as it wobbles, but what I don't want to do is to add any tape or any floral fix to this fantastic container. It is a vintage container, it has been given to me by a member of my family, so I don't really want to spoil it. I want to try and keep it as pristine and well looked after as I possibly can. Right, okay, so where are we going to start? What I'm hoping to achieve is like a dome shape on the top, not too formal and not too compact. But these wonderful roses are obviously a very large head. If I show you that a bit closer up there to the camera, you can see how fantastic it is. It's like the garden roses that are really very popular at the moment. Bit of scent to it as well, so it has that added bonus, and I'm really looking forward to using it. So what do I do first? I think I'm going to create an outline shape first. It's going to be a circular dome design, but I'm very torn between do I add any foliage in at all. But I'm really liking this variegated euonymus, and picks up the colour of those roses beautifully. Really good colour link and good colour combination there. And what I'm worried about is it might be too fussy. If it does appear too fussy, then I have a darker green Florist Ruscus. You might know this as hard Ruscus, and this will calm the design down if it ends up looking too busy and too fussy. Right, so let's get some less of the talking, as they say, and let's get some of the foliage in place. Now, the euonymus has a bit of a curve. This is garden foliage, so it's not quite as straight and as rigid as my commercially available Ruscus. So I'm going to make the use of the curvy shapes by softening the edge of my container slightly. Now, the only problem with this euonymus, which is from Friend's Garden, is that the pieces are quite short, so I'm limited in how wide I can go with this design. But bearing in mind our principles and elements of design, I'm looking to have a dome sort of shaped arrangement which is visually about twice the size of my container. And I also need to remember that the glassware is transparent, so it's not very visually heavy. It's not like a very dark coloured container, which can be more attracting and more demanding to the eye. The glass is see-through, so it's not as visually heavy as some of the containers you'll see me use while I'm working. Okay, so what I'm just trying to achieve is a round shape, but nothing too formal, not too severe and not too symmetrical and perfectly arranged, if that makes sense. I'm not too concerned if I have a slightly longer piece on one side than the other, but what we're looking to do is create something fairly circular. And I'm thinking wedding. Not that I can really remember at the moment what a wedding is like, because of course we still have the restrictions in place. But I'm thinking opulent wedding, large venue, maybe a big castle, and this type of arrangement would really suit the scale and the proportions of a large venue. And you can just imagine them all laid out, one after the other, on a large banqueting table somewhere very attractive. Oh, I think I'm getting a bit carried away here with imagining being somewhere very opulent. But you'll see a good circular shape starting to take place. It's not perfect and I'm not too worried about that. Great small foliage, a little bit of water leakage, but who minds? And just to calm that down, because I am a bit worried that that's going to be quite fussy. It's a very eye-catching foliage, small and busy. So we'll just add in some of the dark green Florist hard ruscus just to give it a more calming influence. This is a really long-lasting foliage. I don't use this a great deal in demonstrations. No reason why I don't use it. It's easily available. You should be able to purchase it from your local florist shop, and you can buy it online if you're able to buy your flowers from an online supplier. Okay, slightly longer here, but we'll see how it comes along, and if I need to chop that off, then I can do that as we progress. And then some spare foliage should I need to fill in as we get towards the end. Right, now my rose is the bigger of the flower, so I'm going to put these in first. I've chosen 6, and they did only come in yesterday, so they've conditioned and they've opened up beautifully. Sometimes this garden type rose takes 3 or 4 days to open, so you need to be quite mindful if you're ordering them in. They won't come in looking like this. They'll be very tight and very small, and you have to remove quite a lot of the outer petals, which will be damaged, before this amazing size head emerges from the middle. Isn't it lovely? Right, okay, so we're looking to go about twice the height of my container there, or probably not quite so tall, maybe about the same height as my container, because obviously twice would be much taller. So probably about the same size as the container again, and that's going to give me my height flower. I've then got the option, if I feel it's too tall, I can work my way down with it as we go through. But for a minute, I think that's quite interesting and proportionally quite correct. And then what I'm going to look to do is to almost repeat that shape around the centre point. So it's a radial arrangement. It's an all-round design seen from different directions. But I'm keeping the length of the stem very similar to that height flower. And that hopefully will give me quite a circular design. Now then, I'm not worried about it looking too perfect. If you think about gardens and nature, flowers don't grow in perfect lines or perfect circles. So they're fairly equidistant apart. Oh, isn't that lovely? I mean, you could even leave it just as it is there, with just a bit more filling in with more foliage. And then what I'm going to do again on the next level down, so that I now have a flower in between, I'm going to go round again in a circle. Now I am going to need one more flower, so that's me not concentrating properly. I need another one of those roses just to fit in this gap here. And then we've pretty much got our focal flowers in place. Okay, so I've nipped off, I've got myself another rose. I need to remove some of the outer petals, some of the guard petals. Now, if you've never worked with a garden rose before, whatever part of the world they come from, you will get a lot of damage around the outside. And to really see the beauty of the rose, you do have to, it can be a bit scary, but you do have to peel those petals off on the outside. Guard petals need to be removed, and you get that gorgeous bloom open up in the centre. Now, how's that? Wonderful. Oh, I love it already. Now, as a commercial florist, when you consider delivering of flowers, we will quite often make two designs, or the design separate to the container, because it means that we can transport them far more easily to the venue and then sit them in position. If you can imagine the weight of the vase, the fact that it's quite delicate and might break easy in transit, often enables us to do this process to enable us to get to the venue without any damage or without any accidents. Okay, so now I've got this lovely alstroemeria, and you think about shape again. This is a completely different shape to my rose. The rose obviously is a circle. We could have gone with completing this design with all circular shaped flowers rather, but I liked the contrast in the texture of the alstroemeria. It's going to give us something different to look at. And I've picked myself 4, but I think for a minute I'm only going to use 3. Now that one, if we look at that one, if you can see the head there in the middle, it's a lot longer and taller than the others. So I'm going to remove that one and put it back in on its own in the cluster. But that will enable me to have the head all on the same level rather than having this one standing up there on its own. So again, fairly equally spaced out around the outside. And again, if you think about guests sitting at a table, try and enable the guests on either side of the table to have something interesting to look at. We don't want Mrs. Jones on one side of the table having a beautiful bloom, and Mrs. Davis on the opposite side with nothing to look at other than a leaf. So I work my way around now with the gerbras, and these of course are quite soft stemmed, so you have to work with them quite slowly and quite gently. Don't over force them there very heavy handedly into the foam, because it will damage the stem end. And gerbras, do know I'm using a scissors, but you can use a sharp knife for gerbera. They do like to have a nice clean cut on the bottom, and they're very sensitive to ethylene gas. So try and remember to make sure that your tools and equipment are nice and clean, otherwise you will transfer bacteria from your plant material. So how's that looking? Isn't that delightful? Right, now we could do with a few more gerbera around this side, and out of the flower combination that I got in here, I think the gerbera is quite a bright colour, so it's possibly more dominant, and by far the colour that's catching your eye the most. I'm going to mass them all the way around. Still can't believe how amazing these roses are and how delightful they are as they open up. Now, if you can see with this gerbera here, I've placed this slightly lower, and that gives us recession, helps to create depth, draws our eye there into the centre. And even though the larger white rose is probably my dominant focal point, what we've got to be careful of is that they don't fight for attention alongside this very busy gerbera. Whoop. Now you can usually tell where when you're coming to the end of the space in your foam, because it starts getting difficult to add flowers in. A couple more of the gerbera. And again, try and remember to angle them at slightly different positions like they would be in nature, so you're the heads of the flower are angled in different ways. Remember that they will look a little bit like headlights if you position them so they're staring directly at you. And of course, don't forget, as an all-round design, there should be something interesting on this side and this side here, and on opposite sides like that as well. Now I think my Alstroemery here is a little bit high, so I'm just going to push it down. And then what I'll do now is use this fabulous September flower. This will give it a whole new dimension. Now it would be fine to go around again with another flower type. It would be great if you used the round shape, because that would really emphasise the dome shape of the design. But I think the softness of the September flower is also going to work really nicely in creating that sort of opulent look that I'm going for. Now some Trilon ivy would have been wonderful in here. It could have cascaded beautifully over the side of the container. Unfortunately, I don't have any. Could have used amaranthus in the autumn. That would have cascaded lovely over the side. I'm sure there are lots of, if I thought about it, I could name lots of cascading materials. But we'll keep going, working our way around, making sure that we're really emphasising this circular shape and continuing the dome effect all the way around. Big chrysanthemum blooms would be lovely in here, or carnations, obviously, if you can't get hold of a large rose like this. Chrysanthemum blooms, a larger quantity of your ordinary rose, so you wouldn't need quite so many heads when they're large like this, but if they were smaller heads, then you'd need to have more flowers in there to create the same effect. Now I'm just going to continue working all the way around. Cut some shorter pieces as I go. It's nothing too technical at this stage. It's again just ensuring that I've ensured that the shape is circular all the way around, that we have materials radiating out from the centre point so that we create that very traditional effect with our stems. And if you can see here, this side's possibly too long, so we can make that shorter. And one of the benefits of working on a turntable like this is that I can keep turning the design around. Now often from the camera angle, you might be looking at it a slightly different position than I am. So I do apologise if you can maybe see the floral foam, or there's gaps in the area that you're looking at it from. I'm trying quite hard to make sure they're all covered. Now you might be noticing I've got some leaf drop there from the euonymus, and it's mainly because it's quite new growth on the euonymus, so I had to be quite selective in the pieces that I've chosen. And the new growth is always quite soft, and that's the bits that are dropping off as I'm arranging. Probably wouldn't use it if it was going out to a genuine customer, but for purposes of a tutorial, it's fine to use. Okay, so let's have a quick look under here, see how we're going along. I think that's looking fairly attractive. Nice even distribution of all our flower material, and that a row of those on a reception table would look absolutely wonderful. So if you're having a dinner party, you could do this in a much smaller scale to fit on your table at home. You could even use it on a coffee table down quite low, in which case you'd be looking at it from the top. If you wanted to remove that centre flower there and place a candle in the middle, that would be perfectly acceptable. And really this type of design, this domed effect, is achievable with quite a lot of different flowers, flower types and flower varieties. I personally would go for rounder heads rather than spikes like anthuriums or stock. The rounder shapes for me give this nicer effect, I think, to the overall style of the arrangement. So what do we think? I've been dying to work with these all day, and I'm chuffed to bits with that one. This is coming home with me, and I'm going to put that pride of place on my centre table at home, and I'm going to be able to enjoy those wonderful roses for a few weeks yet. And there is a lovely perfume, so even better. So thanks for watching again, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.